Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen deputies, ladies and gentlemen ministers, dear honored guests, friends from abroad here in Luxembourg, a warm welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, all the best to you. A student who has been winning international prizes in physics since a young age. A couple who have built up 3 successful restaurants with dedicated staff. A woman who is involved in an association to help people in wheelchairs with an assistance dog. These are just 3 stories of people who have gotten to know each other in recent times. 3 of the many facets of our nation. 3 pieces of a large mosaic. A world nation, that is what we are all together. You can't really grasp it, and yet it is very tangible. A nation is a group, a society, a shared destiny that is built, experienced, and remembered together. Social cohesion is the most valuable thing we have as a nation, especially in these times when many things are being questioned by loud populism, new technologies, economic and social upheavals. The international system, as we have known it since the Second World War, is becoming less and less recognizable. A place for peace, wars in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. A place for free trade, tariffs, barriers, and blockades. A place of cooperation is being replaced by egoism, self-interest, and short-sightedness. That international law, upon which the progress of the last 80 years has been built, is being eroded and grossly ignored. In Ukraine, in Greenland, and in other places. Power is replacing dialogue and diplomacy. Such major challenges, which are too great for individual countries, like climate change, humanitarian crises, and world hunger, are being neglected internationally. And even economic relations are being redefined based on strategic assessments, especially in the areas of energy, but also technology. I am not just talking here about isolated situations. The world as a whole is in a state of upheaval. We are living in a period of profound changes that will define the coming decades. Even if international cooperation is lacking, the consequences of what happens in the world do not stop at borders. That is why Luxembourg will always remain a country that is committed to international cooperation, to multilateral institutions, and to international law with our partners in the European Union, in NATO, and in the United Nations. What happens beyond our borders, sometimes far away, has direct and concrete consequences for us. That is true in good times. But it is also true in every international crisis. We are now confronted with several crises in our immediate neighborhood, in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Iran. And even within Europe, we are feeling more and more tendencies that undermine fundamental principles, sometimes supported by hybrid attacks from third countries. For us, these developments must lead to a strengthening of the European Union. The EU stands firm against these internal tendencies because as an expression of our core values, it remains for us the best way to defend such a future. We want more Europe because we want to preserve democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. And the EU also stands firm in the face of the turbulence in the world as it is experiencing them, not independently. It is affected by what happens in the world in terms of energy, in terms of security, technology, space, and food production. The war in Iran, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, once again reveal all these dependencies. We are seeing this very concretely right now in prices and at the pump, but also in fertilizer, food, and in the production of certain goods. And the real economic and social consequences are at risk of becoming even more severe, but it is yet to come. In this sense, the experts from the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank are warning us even more strongly. Luxembourg is no exception. And naturally, this poses challenges for every country. They are serious for Luxembourg, for its partners in the EU and in the Middle East. For example, we get a much larger share of our energy from abroad. At the same time, our gas and electricity suppliers are already passing on the short-term effects over the next few years. And still, people and our businesses are feeling the impact of this war in very different ways. It can also be true that some companies are achieving good results, depending on the industry. Commerce and crafts, especially construction, are struggling. Here, fuel prices have a relatively bigger impact on logistics and transport than on the clothing boutique or the bank. Such nuances don't just affect businesses. They also affect our employees. It makes a difference whether you heat with gas, oil, or a heat pump. Whether you use a car or public transport, whether you earn more or less. But above all, we run the risk that inflation will continue to rise if these high energy prices persist as they affect the entire economy. All these are different facets of reality, mosaic pieces of the bigger picture. We should discuss this, as we have done before, together with the social partners in a tripartite format. But if we all see ourselves as part of something bigger, then these different realities do not create division, but rather hold us together. Then we do not stand against each other, but with each other, and that is what keeps our nation united. The government wants Luxembourg to remain united and hold together, to stand firmly side by side, to live harmoniously with one another, to prosper and grow as one community, to know and discover new things together, to preserve our natural environment together, and to actively shape the future together. What distinguishes a nation, defines its history and all its achievements, we sing about that. Its actions, its decisions. Chamber, the government, social partners, the press, they all bear part of the responsibility. Mr. President, the government is now in the middle of its mandate. We have done a lot, and there is still much ahead of us, which is also normal at this stage. Everything, but with one goal: prosperity, well-being, unity. All our decisions aim to strengthen peace and freedom, prosperity and democracy in our country. Strengthening Luxembourg for the future, that was, is, and remains our goal. With more purchasing power, more solidarity, more support for families, more housing, with more jobs, with a safer way of living together, with more renewable energies. That is the Luxembourg we want to create, with confidence in the future here in our country. These are major challenges, especially in these times of uncertainty and global change. We have to deal with these changes and their impact on Luxembourg, and that is something that many in our country are indeed feeling. A lot seems uncertain and unclear, but one thing is clear: this is not the time to bury our heads in the sand. It is time to take responsibility. Together, forward. And we all want to take on this responsibility with a steady hand and a committed heart. Mr. President, the cohesion in our society depends above all on how we treat those who are not doing so well in our society. For this government, it is clear we will not leave anyone behind. We want to support and understand everyone. The world is built on trust. Trust in others, in democracy, trust in the future. When this trust is lost, hope and perspective are lost as well. Hopes and perspectives disappear. And then we lose what is best in us. Poverty is not a weakness. Poverty is an injustice. Above all, when it affects children. As a shared responsibility, we must prevent injustice where there is a risk and fight it where, unfortunately, it is already a reality. This government, in dialogue with the sector, has developed the first coherent strategy to address poverty in all its forms. Social assistance includes smartly targeted measures, the cost of living allowance, the energy premium, rent subsidies, and the tax credit for single parents. And for those earning the unqualified minimum wage, there is currently no income tax. That means hundreds of euros more for people for whom every euro counts. The most important innovation that will come in 2027 is the complementary cost of living allowance. This combines 5 current forms of assistance, including the cost of living allowance, the energy premium, and the new social assistance for people who are retired. A single benefit, which means one application, one calculation, one procedure. That is administrative simplification in its purest form. And on top of that, we are also automating this new assistance. Through automatic renewal as long as the criteria continue to be met, through automatic pre-filling or review, and through automatic exchange of information between ministries. With this assistance, new subsidies can also be granted directly, because the cost of living is a crucial factor for many people. We can really provide targeted support to those who need it most. With this new assistance, up to 3,000 euros per year for families with low incomes. This is social assistance with a black-blue signature. Simple, fast, uncomplicated. We make sure that the help arrives where it is needed. That's why the Minister for Family Affairs is also centralizing all information about social assistance in one easy-to-access place with the new social guide starting in October. And at the same time, work must continue to pay off. Because, of course, it remains the best way to combat poverty and social exclusion. You can see this in the new complementary allowance, which is now being thought through even further. And with that, we have also announced substantial tax relief. We are leaving more money in the pockets of those who work. Everyone will have more net income from their gross salary than in 2023. And if you look at it more closely, these tax reliefs are especially significant, particularly for single parents. All of this contributes to greater cohesion in our society. And this cohesion is the foundation of our social system. We stand by each other when someone is ill, when someone is struggling, when someone is struck by misfortune. And the government bears the responsibility to secure this system. That's why we have carried out a comprehensive pension reform, the first in 14 years. The government is fully aware of its responsibility to maintain solidarity between generations, to ensure security, to look to life in old age with confidence, for a country, for Europe, for the next generations, to be able to discuss these things. And it is also our responsibility to modernize the healthcare system. When it comes to health, especially in matters of health, it's about people. People must be at the center of a healthcare system that is accessible, as I have said before. Under this government, we will not allow any deconventioning. We do not want a two-tier healthcare system. Tariffs will continue to remain uniform in the future, according to what is needed and necessary. We stand by our solidarity-based healthcare system. A two-tier healthcare system is bad for the cohesion of our society. But access to the healthcare system must not be limited by long waiting times either. That's why we are funding an additional emergency ward in our hospital. And we are also working on the 10-minute proximity with better infrastructure throughout the country. With construction projects for new hospitals or extensions and modernization of existing sites of our hospitals, and with additional outpatient services at the Kloster and in Grevenmacher, where, among other things, new mammography machines are being added. And in the future, we want to bring small medical procedures and interventions closer to home and also outside the hospital, for example, at eye doctors and dermatologists. This will bring care even closer to the patient and reduce waiting times. This means that even more activities can be carried out in doctors' offices. The Minister of Health will present the corresponding changes in the coming weeks. This follows the law that has already been introduced, allowing doctors to come together in a group practice. The goal is to make financing infrastructure and equipment easier and to introduce administrative simplifications for doctors. But I also believe that this will make an important profession more attractive because we need doctors and healthcare professionals to ensure access to medicine and quality care in the future as well. I have allowed the medical master's degree at the university because for me, with a specific similar status for doctors in specialized training, there is a major gap in our current system. This way, the social healthcare system will continue to be in the future an expression of a country that stands together. Mr. President, sir, the future belongs entirely to the next generation of young people. Social cohesion starts at the grassroots because we live together. Strengthening the family unit is a central promise of the government. But as everyone knows, things have changed over the past decades. Through evolutions in family compositions, we see a great deal of diversity and new technologies. Families today are much more diverse. About 1 in 4 children grows up in a single-parent household, usually with their mother. Today, it is still mostly women who take parental leave, and they often do so on a part-time basis. These developments show us that every family in Luxembourg has its own reality and can grow up in different environments. Our common task remains just as important as ever. Every child should have the same opportunities for a fulfilling life. That is why this government has presented ambitious measures for every family, for every child, a coherent socially just package with 3 pillars: tax reform, child benefit, and childcare services. Starting in 2021, there should only be a single tax class. This is a fundamental realignment of our tax policy that takes social developments into account. And for this, the finance minister is seeking broad consensus around the reform. He is proposing, for those who want it, a long transition period of 25 years. This is one of the tax classes for greater purchasing power and a further relief for most people. For more tax justice between families and within couples, and for more predictability in case of misfortune. Above all, this reform puts the child factor at the center of attention. With a new allowance, we reduce the amount on which tax is paid by €3,000 per child up to 3 years old. This way, we give young parents the financial means to spend more time with their children and to build their families. With the further increase of the tax credit for a longer period, we are making sure that child poverty continues to decline. That brings me to the second pillar, child benefits. As of January 1st next year, child benefits will be increased by €45 per month, and for children over 12 years old, even by €60. And for the back-to-school allowance, it will be increased by 60 or even €90 as well. Our goal here is to give every child a fair chance, no matter what situation their parents are in. We are also introducing a new bracket for the childcare allowance. This new bracket should financially encourage parents to have their child's language development assessed. Precisely because early childhood education centers are crucial for the emotional, cognitive, and language development of the child. The third pillar is the reform of the childcare voucher system. We want to ensure that every child gets access to a childcare place, regardless of their parents' situation. Here too, we are relieving families by increasing the amount paid out to families by the state by around €80 million. This means that on average, a family will feel about €3,000 per child per year. At the same time, we are strengthening quality control and staff ratios in the interest of the children. In the future, a structure must bill exactly for the hours that correspond to the child's attendance, as agreed with the parents. This way, we are creating more space in the facilities and helping all families to better balance their private and professional lives. Tax reform, child benefit, the voucher service, a coherent policy to strengthen all families and all children. A fair start in life for everyone. A policy that is also reflected in the school system. For this reason, the Minister of Education is progressively expanding in all schools the possibility, not the obligation, for literacy in French. Nothing is being taken away from anyone. On the contrary, everyone is actually gaining something. A better chance of success at school. For years, so much potential has been lost because 2/3 of children are in a language literacy program that they do not need from the start. We are giving many of them a better option without denying the Luxembourgish language. Luxembourgish remains the main language in these schools. In addition to languages, children must also learn how to handle new technologies. Despite many positive aspects, smartphones and social media can also have negative effects, influencing how children think and speak, behave, and develop. It is important to teach them a healthy screen-life balance, but also to help them learn a lot. That's why we introduced a mobile phone ban in schools, combined with more sports lessons and more real-life interaction. Especially at a very young age, we have established clear protective measures. There are to be no smartphones allowed within our care structures. Furthermore, through dedicated parent forums, we also help families set the right digital framework at home. For us, this initiative is not about punishment, but about the well-being of our children. The phone itself, above all, it's the social media platforms, which are often neither social nor true media. They claim to want to connect, inspire, and inform people. But in reality, they are often the cause of isolation, self-doubt, and misinformation. They glorify and trivialize violence, and there is sexualized content, all without regard for the users. A survey by Be Secure No shows that 2/3 of our young people are affected. We cannot ignore this. It is our shared responsibility to protect them. For this reason, the Minister of Justice has introduced a legislative proposal to combat digital violence. In it, we define new criminal offenses in the penal code, for example, the unauthorized sharing of intimate images or the consider the growing threat of online stalking. A recent comprehensive study clearly shows the deeply negative impacts of social media platforms on the cognitive development of our young children. This is fundamentally about the long-term health and well-being of our children. Should we now ask the government to introduce a strict minimum age requirement for the use of social media? If there is no unified European solution found by the end of this year, we will certainly take action and do it ourselves. Just as we see happening in many other countries around the globe at the national level. As politicians, the safety, health, and overall well-being of our children and young people is always at the very center of our focus. This is true both in the digital world and in the real world. For this reason, the government will present a comprehensive set of new measures and strategic initiatives next week to further develop and strengthen structures in this area. We need to make our system, which is currently quite complex, much more efficient and accessible for everyone. Situations for our young people safer through new therapeutic social structures and better networking of the systems. There is a clear need for action here, and therefore this remains a priority for the government to implement as quickly as possible the texts that have been submitted regarding youth protection and juvenile criminal law. None of us wants young offenders. We must act now to ensure they do not end up in a prison cell. That is precisely why these administrative processes need to be completed with the utmost urgency, and the necessary support structures must be established in parallel. Furthermore, children and young people deserve a safe and nurturing environment for their free time. and most especially within their own homes. Mr. President, for the vast majority of us, home represents our very first memory, a foundational sense of belonging and safety. Where we played as children, where we experienced moments that we still cherish today. When it comes to the topic of housing, it's about that feeling of being at home. Housing policy therefore raises fundamental questions. Where will our children be able to live? Where will we find housing where it's needed? How do we maintain social cohesion and a sense of belonging? These questions are concrete, they are urgent, and they concern all households. A home must remain a realistic opportunity for everyone. Who we live together with is a question of social cohesion today. Since day one, this government has been working with all stakeholders to ensure that housing remains affordable, together with the municipalities, the public developers, the private sector, and civil society. Our goal is clear: to build more so that everyone has a better chance of accessing affordable housing. That's why we are tackling the administrative hurdles. We all know that procedures are the biggest construction site in the country. They are long, complex, and therefore they must not be set in stone. For many other individuals, this process typically requires a significantly longer period of time. But it is entirely possible, and indeed it is absolutely necessary for our progress. That's why, on behalf of the government, I have formally presented to the members of the Chamber of Deputies a comprehensive 10-point plan for a fundamental paradigm shift in our procedures. 7 of these points have already been successfully implemented or officially submitted to the Chamber. The final 3 points of this plan will be introduced very shortly in the coming days. They simplify construction procedures fundamentally without compromising on quality. With the silence procedure, if there is no response, requests are automatically authorized when the deadline is reached. With the natural deadline, no biotopes are endangered without making construction projects more expensive or more difficult. With the national building regulations, the rules are harmonized everywhere in the country so that we can build more efficiently. With the ministerial reallocation, individual property owners can no longer block the construction of a new neighborhood. With compensation settled once and for all, the environmental impact of construction projects on state land can be compensated. We were, are, and will remain convinced of these measures. They will, in the medium term, bring new momentum, but at the moment the market is not developing the way we would like it to. Demand remains high and supply is low. This is not something that happened overnight. It has built up over the past decades. If you look back, there is no miracle solution. We must all work together and make every effort to encourage new private property construction, to encourage and to create more affordable housing and public sector housing. For that, we need to restore confidence in construction, the so-called private development sector. Many people are familiar with these problems. Construction sites are not progressing as planned. In the worst case, the developer goes bankrupt and the construction site remains abandoned, sometimes for years. Trust from buyers can only return if there is better legal protection under the WF law, especially when it comes to the completion guarantee. Once people feel more confident, from the bricklayer to the roof on the house, we will also reduce the registration fee on new builds. With this, the government is also taking direct responsibility here to create more affordable housing. Since 2023, the budget for social housing promoters has more than doubled, and it will remain at over $500 million per year for the coming years. In addition, we have projected another €500 million in the WV investment program to be implemented across the entire country. We have also decided to provide this program with an additional budget of $300 million to continue supporting it over the coming years. In the future, through the WV purchase program, the state will also pay attention to those regions where projects are only partially purchased. Many construction projects are in fact only 10, 20 or 30% sold because the building permits have been launched, but not enough apartments have been financed. In this way, with a smaller contribution, the state can unblock more projects and make construction possible. This creates more affordable living space. We are also mobilizing other resources to create land for affordable housing in the future through a targeted acquisition policy, calling on projects to be built and other measures to reduce costs. This is very good. I am honestly quite impressed with the results you have achieved here. The quality of the work is exceptional, and it is clear that a lot of effort was put into every single detail. Everything has been handled with great care, meeting all of our expectations perfectly. It is truly a wonderful achievement that deserves to be recognized for its excellence and the professional way it was completed from start to finish. The government will continue to do everything to ensure that everyone has access to housing. Housing is not a luxury, housing is a right. That is why the government is also strengthening tenants by improving the legal framework regarding health standards and by establishing a national rent commission. Housing policy is about people, and for us, people are at the center of our shared life and living together. Mr. President, living together is not just some abstract theory or a distant concept. It is a deeply lived practice, occurring every single weekend at local village festivals, in various sports clubs, and in many music associations. These are the precious moments when people from all walks of life come together, truly get to know each other, and exchange their unique ideas. It happens everywhere where people connect, everywhere where community is built, and everywhere where we find common ground. A sense of togetherness arises, and this togetherness can only emerge where people feel safe. That is why we are bringing the police closer to the people. I, as the Minister of the Interior, am doing this based on 4 principles. Since 2023, my staff has increased the police force by 500 officers. My presence. Last year, there were significantly more security patrols than ever before. My proximity, my 105 distinct local municipalities and the local police forces are being greatly strengthened. My prevention, my effective measures against illegal drug dealing, along with the implementation of simplified camera surveillance in various public spaces. And we are giving the police more power to issue restraining orders, more resources overall, and better legal means to carry out their duties. This way, we strengthen security and the feeling of safety. We are empowering our police, who are there to protect both victims, because when something happens, both the victim and the neighborhood are affected in our communities. And that's where social cohesion, which is lived out by everyone, can be stifled. That's why we need to provide better legal frameworks for municipal services. With more professional services, our municipalities will be better equipped to meet current and future challenges, and they will be able to offer more opportunities for people to come together and grow together. That's why the Ministry of Sports is also strengthening the role of the sports coordinator at the municipal level. And we are expanding subsidies for clubs, because sport is a place where people from different generations, cultures, and social backgrounds can meet and connect. And that's not just on the field. A club doesn't just exist on the field. There are a vast number of dedicated volunteers who are actively involved in sports, but also in local fire brigades, the youth scouts, and various musical groups. For all of them, we truly want to make their daily administrative life much easier. In my current capacity serving as the Minister of Justice, I am deeply committed to streamlining and simplifying the complex legal framework on non-profit associations. At the same time, I have to ensure a sense of moderation so that we can successfully bring everyone together in a unified way to enable participation in sports and culture. That's why the government presented an action plan last month with 99 measures aimed at making culture more accessible and removing all kinds of barriers. Experiencing culture should not be a privilege. Culture thrives on what is lived by all people in the country as an expression of community. traditions, values, openness, respect, and solidarity. And, of course, culture includes both multilingualism and the Luxembourgish language. To further support this, the Minister of Culture will present a new action plan for the Luxembourgish language during this legislative period, because the interest among the population is clearly there. That is perfectly clear. Currently, all available courses to learn the Luxembourgish language are completely fully booked. Last year alone, over 2 million different people had their written texts checked by the official spell checker. Furthermore, in the Luxembourgish online dictionary, there were more than 40 million individual word searches recorded last year. That averages out to approximately one request every 2.2 seconds. Or, to put it another way, over 1,000 searches since the start of this very presentation. I certainly would have expected to receive this kind of advice. We are currently developing a very similar focus with innovative new language tools and sophisticated digital resources that will soon complete our translator function. Language creates a profound and essential connection between people and also within our own country. It is a country where diverse people come together, even if they sometimes clash within our complex political system. This is the essence of our democracy. This serves as the clearest possible expression of our shared life together. Especially now, and especially in these challenging times, it is absolutely vital that we work to protect our democracy. We require strong, stable governments, a much more diverse press landscape, a fundamental right to access information, and significantly better protection against legal disruptions. In a healthy democracy, we must compensate for one another together so that we can ensure together, we are establishing a clear and collective direction for our future. It is about how we actively shape and define the very environment in which we live. And to this environment also belongs our precious natural world. Mr. President, a vibrant and flourishing natural world is the essential stage on which healthy human coexistence plays out. Preserving this nature together must be a fundamental ambition for every single one of us. Many of us are already deeply committed to this cause, or threatened by heat waves. Many of us want regulated seasons or stable weather. Many of us want fresh air, clean water, healthy forests. For governments, the message is clear. We want to protect the world and tackle climate change. We do not see politics as something separate from the rest, but as part of the whole. Environmental policy must be pursued with a sense of priority and not be slowed down. And we do this with people, through dialogue, by convincing and encouraging. That is our compass, and we remain true to it. The Ministry of the Environment will, in dialogue with all stakeholders, create a new restoration plan. The Ministry will. We are placing a significant focus on the quality of our waters and the overall health of our forests. We are fighting against climate change because it is absolutely vital that we transition to renewable energies here. The government will set clear and decisive guidelines, aiming for simply much more renewable energy production. With this objective in mind, we have proposed a comprehensive set of approximately 50 distinct measures. These 50 measures will be the foundation of our strategy moving forward. In order to significantly expand renewable energies, partly to effectively deal with the challenges of climate change, and partly to dismantle the existing infrastructure of fossil energy production. Let me take a moment to highlight three very important advances. First, it is essential to note that pre-financing for PV installations has now finally become a reality. Furthermore, the newly implemented administrative procedure is much more efficient, streamlined, and significantly simpler for all citizens to use. You can see the direct difference on the bill. No more waiting for thousands of euros to be reimbursed. This makes climate protection easy. That's why we are expanding this system to include charging stations for electric cars, heat pumps, and renovations, and we are extending it until 2030. Secondly, today, the government is proposing a bill for the construction of PV installations on state-owned land. This way, we are utilizing unused potential and generating electricity for 10,000 people. If the text is approved by the Chamber in the coming weeks, we can launch concrete projects this year. Thirdly, we have proposed the principle of silence as consent, also for environmental authorizations for renewable energies. To accelerate things, in the coming months, we will consistently continue on this path, and the numbers show that we are on the right track. With 8,000 new PV installations, there will be more new installations in 2024 than ever before, and in 2025, there will be more solar power fed into the grid than ever before, an increase of 26% in a single year. We have seen two remarkable records in just 2 years. That is truly good for the health of the planet, beneficial for all people, and vital for the future of our country. Mr. President, that brings me back to the ongoing war in Iran and its many devastating consequences. The last 19 years of conflict in the region, how vulnerable the EU is as long as it remains dependent on fossil energy that comes from a region of the world like this. The crisis in Iran has held the global energy market in suspense. The government has responded to the situation with caution and concern. On the one hand, security of supply must continue to be guaranteed. So far, there have been no shortages, neither in oil nor in gas or electricity. On the other hand, the international situation remains volatile and extremely uncertain, and so there is a major impact on prices. Everyone has felt the effects at the gas pump, even if the price does not remain at this high level for long. In the medium term, gas could also drive up electricity prices. These developments will still have an impact on the global economy. Luxembourg will not be spared either. Projections from the Statistics Office show that wages and prices will not continue to rise. The crisis and its effects on the economic and social spheres will occupy us for at least another year. For this reason, the government and social partners have been invited to a tripartite meeting to discuss measures, to discuss how we can respond to this crisis and how we can preserve people's purchasing power and the competitiveness of our businesses. These are two central priorities for this government. This also applies to the index, which is a key element of our social model. Some of the measures being considered, and those that are not being considered, are intended to prevent us from losing what we have achieved so far by a major international crisis abroad. That is precisely why we must very carefully weigh every single step we take and deeply consider the potential impact of one specific measure on another. Because if one side pushes just a little bit too hard, or if one side goes much too far, then together we will all inevitably end up losing out in the very end. Luxembourg truly works through a spirit of close cooperation. In this ongoing cooperation, we have to think beyond the short-term horizon. The broad economic and social problems risk becoming very real. Setting the right course now will prepare our country for the future. We have to discuss things together and act with a steady hand. The government has already acted over the past few months. We and many others have done a lot, which is since January 1st of this year, the state has covered a large part of the grid fees for citizens and businesses, amounting to 150 million euros. Together with the 80 million for the compensation mechanisms, we have thus substantially reduced electricity bills as of January 1st this year. In addition, we have provided targeted support to those who are most affected by energy prices by tripling the energy allowance. A single person now receives 600 euros per year, and a family with 2 children gets over 1,000. This is one of the measures from the Climate Social Plan that brings together effective actions to ensure the energy transition is accompanied in a socially just way. Ideas such as a reform program in the form of the climate premium, targeted zones for energy renovations, or social leasing for electric cars. So help me to hang on in order to embrace other sources of energy and not to impose them. Embracing other sources of energy means protecting ourselves from high costs, the planet from harmful emissions, and the country from risky dependencies. This is especially true with the war in Iran, which is once again leading to serious consequences. With the war today, its impact is even broader, including much wider economic and social consequences on inflation and the situation in the labor market. And we must be prepared for these consequences. Because an economy that stagnates brings no social, ecological, or technological progress. The economy is part of a whole. Mr. President, the economy is a joint project. None of us can manage it alone, not the government, not the businesses, not the employees, especially in such a challenging international environment. We only succeed when all three come together and work as one. That is exactly why the government is always ready to reach out for dialogue, to build bridges. With respect for the wishes of both social partners and in the interest of the entire country. The agreement with the social partners at ArcelorMittal secures jobs and guarantees investments in the future of Luxembourg as a location. Such agreements show that social dialogue between the three parties can continue to function, even in difficult and challenging times. We want our country to continue working together and to continue growing together. Prosperity is the foundation of our standard of living. The pension system, health insurance, our hospitals, schools, our roads. With this approach, we have come through the difficult years. Under the current government, the situation has indeed improved, but we are still seeing fewer births than the historical average, or in comparison with the Eurozone. And the war in the Middle East risks intensifying this trend. Our economy, which has struggled to recover since the COVID pandemic. Especially last year, right after the crisis, growth barely reached 0.6%. Almost all sectors have lost their momentum. This affects construction, commerce, and the restaurant industry. The financial sector remains the engine of our economy, but it is facing intense international competition. And without growth, there are also few new jobs. We have not created enough jobs in the private sector in any year to finance the social system. A significant majority of the new jobs that have been successfully established are located within the government-run and heavily regulated industries. At the same time, unemployment has certainly increased, now even surpassing the European average. And this is despite an increasingly acute shortage of personnel in certain sectors because the profiles of the people seeking work do not match the available jobs. The jobs are there. It's the shortage of personnel. This shortage not only limits companies in their activities, but also burdens the workforce who have to compensate for the gaps. Employees, people, and companies are looking forward to technological progress. All these are developments that none of us can ignore because they affect us all. But if we want to move forward, we have to find solutions together. An economy does not consist only of companies, just as little as an economy consists only of employees. And the government does not control every aspect of the economy either. We all work together to create value or to contribute on site, with all its consequences. That can sometimes be discussed in a tripartite meeting, but this is not a topic that can be handled with a crisis instrument. It is a task that requires ongoing commitment and dialogue. The government is committed on all these topics to talking with the social partners and the responsible bodies, to exchanging views and to finding joint solutions. Because that means, together, ensuring that the economy grows and jobs are created. That is why the government itself is committed to a pragmatic and goal-oriented approach. This starts with administrative simplification and practical solutions for all the everyday problems. For example, every business will receive a single digital identification number that is valid for all administrative procedures. and the steps to start a business will be grouped into a single procedure. A legislative plan aims to modernize company law and contract law within the next 12 months. All of this with one goal: simpler, clearer, more modern. This especially helps small and medium-sized businesses, which also need support in the form of expertise and financial assistance. For this purpose, we have expanded our offer with the new Pre-Auto Zero for SMEs. This further supports investments in the digital and ecological transition. Just the SME package for the digital transition has been used by over 1,000 businesses since 2024. We also help with business transfers through our new state guarantee. Because in the craft sector alone, it is estimated that 3,000 businesses will have to undergo succession in the next 10 years. Every business, big or small, starts with an idea, and we want to give new momentum to entrepreneurship. For founders who need financing, we have introduced a new tax credit for investments in startups. And here they are. Today, an envelope of 300 million euros has been made available. And instead of requiring a founder to have 12,000 euros in startup capital on day one, we are giving them a year in the future to come up with it. This will also help address the difficulty of opening a bank account. In addition, we will propose new tax measures that specifically target startups and scale-ups to support them. We want to encourage more people to launch themselves into entrepreneurship. The fear of failure often holds people back. Too often, this fear stifles the drive to start a business. In the coming months, we will present a concrete action plan to provide better social protection for the self-employed. We also need to address the area of social security. And we will further strengthen the second chance regime, because even a second attempt can sometimes fail completely. We should not punish those who try, who give it a shot. In the end, the economy draws its strength from its people, from entrepreneurs and from all employees. We also need people with the right profiles. That's why we promote training with the skills plan. There are certainly still better support tools for young people in the pipeline, including an expansion of the offerings at the Digital Learning Hub. We are also adding a scholarship program, which we are approaching together with renowned universities to bring them to Luxembourg. This will help attract the talents that we definitely need for our economic and social development. But for that, we must remain attractive and showcase our strengths. Above all, the quality of life in Luxembourg. This is exactly where the new promotional campaign, Working in Luxembourg, presented by the Minister for the Economy and Labour, comes in. Here, all the information about living and working in Luxembourg is brought together in one place. The goal is to bring the right people and companies together in Luxembourg. These are all areas in which the Minister of Foreign Affairs, together with foreign trade, is also involved in our foreign policy. That's why we always have to find new ways. That is the very recipe for our country and for our financial center. That's why we are always looking for new ideas along the way. The AI Experience Center at Lux, a special regime for carried interest, and a dedicated cybersecurity committee for the financial center. And we continue to enjoy a strong reputation in the field of green finance. We have just managed to bring the world's largest bond issue for the protection of tropical rainforests, with an investment volume of $125 billion to Luxembourg. So we also have to position ourselves in other sectors. Especially now, when investments in security are increasing, it is important for companies to be present in these value chains. That's why we have developed a strategy for the entire fund industry, which fits our country and builds on our strengths. With this in mind, we want to create legal certainty and trust through specific legislative projects. This is why we are focusing on research and innovation with an investment fund of 150 million euros for startups in this sector. We will not be building tanks or rockets, but we will continue to promote innovation that can be used for civilian purposes, especially in space and in the cyber sector. These activities will also be given a new reference point with the creation of a defense campus in Dudelange. These efforts are also consistent with our long-term goals and ambitions in the growing satellite sector. This is an ecosystem with SES as an anchor and many other companies as part of the Luxembourg DNA. We support SES in its ambition to send more satellites with Luxembourgish expertise into space. Among other things, the Space Campus will include a production hall and a testing center for satellites. The construction of satellites directly in Luxembourg. This is a completely new chapter in the history of this industry. In this way, we are further developing the industry into one that is a driver of innovation. Because it is innovation that brings us forward, both as an economy and as a society. Mr. President, the economy is the foundation for many things, but it is not everything. It creates growth and wealth. With a lot and everything, there is also the opportunity to shape it, to make progress. The government will turn Luxembourg into a knowledge society, a place where we create the future together. The future often finds its origin in research. The university and research institutes are a laboratory for the solutions of tomorrow. We support them every year with around 500 million euros. And therefore, the Ministry for Research and Higher Education has established new conventions and a center to ensure that excellent research also finds its way into the real world. One of those technologies that is on the verge of entering everyday life is autonomous driving. Here, Luxembourg is a pioneer in Europe with concrete applications in logistics, on certain roads, and even in specialized services like shuttles. We will soon frame this vision with a legal framework for private cars in order to turn this revolutionary research into everyday reality. That is also the objective of the new deep tech law. Here, we are boldly and steadily moving forward with entirely new technologies that have the potential to solve complex problems. In the initial phase, the focus will be on artificial intelligence and quantum technologies. The Deep Tech Lab promises support from the idea stage through initial financing all the way to commercialization, offering guidance, training, and investment. This will be the core of our AI ecosystem, supported by a secure data center and the new AI supercomputer, which should be ready next year. It will attract and bring together talents from all over the world. It will become a place for interaction through research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Because even the best technology is nothing without the human touch. AI knows that this is a new path forward. Where this will lead us is up to us to decide, but the direction is clear. For the government, the goal is clear. An AI in the service of people to help them reach their full potential or make better decisions. A sovereign AI for people, with the goal of the AI factory to support researchers, businesses, and administrations in adopting AI solutions. And we also want to harness the potential of AI within the government. Luxembourg has officially signed and entered into a new partnership within the European Mistral Collaborative Initiative. We and OMA have taken a completely new path, one that only a few European countries have dared to follow. The partnership with Mistral ensures that all data is stored and processed exclusively under the supervision of the Luxembourgish state. This way, we create security, sovereignty, and above all, trust in the use of AI. Over the coming weeks, all ministries and all civil servants in the ministries will get access to the AI chatbot solution. We are also rolling this out to other administrations. And we are supporting civil servants with specific training. Further concrete applications are in preparation. For example, with AI solutions based on LedgerLooks. This simplifies the reading, understanding, and even writing of laws. Or the Skills Project. Thanks to AI, this will enable dynamic insights and analyses of skills and the labor market. All of this is only possible if we have an AI solution that operates sovereignly on our own data infrastructures. This is an aspect where we value sovereignty as an asset, especially in times when the changes in the world are more disruptive. President, ladies and gentlemen, deputies, these changes bring a lot of unrest and uncertainty with them. They bring realities that we have lost control over. Especially in these turbulent times, we must stand together more closely than ever. This applies equally to all the areas I have described. And this is also true in Europe. Clearly, when it comes to Luxembourg, I cannot describe it without also looking at Europe. The history of Luxembourg is the history of Europe. And the future of Europe is the future of Luxembourg. Because even on the international stage, we are stronger together. This can be seen in Ukraine, where the EU provides the majority of support. A green transition, where the EU has acted together, shaped after the example of Denmark. Trade, where the EU has concluded trade agreements with 9 countries, reaching 2.5 billion people. That is why the Luxembourg government advocates for a common European foreign and security policy that can act quickly and decisively. Too often, the EU today is still just watching from the sidelines. We need to set rules not only in foreign policy, but also elsewhere. Or in energy, where supply chains cross borders and cannot be managed alone. Or in technology, to pool our expertise instead of letting America or China take the lead. Or in the economy, so that the single market truly becomes one country. The same goes for financial markets, where the goal is to mobilize investment from all across Europe. And also in the Schengen area, to prevent Europe from falling back into a continent with borders. In all these areas, Luxembourg has an interest in more Europe. The EU is the best guarantee against becoming a pawn for other major powers, based on its own values, to stand for freedom, democracy, and international law values, for which we also stand up beyond our borders, especially in these times. That is why, as part of our contributions and commitments, we have achieved climate financing. That is why we are now firmly committed to a migration policy that is both firm and compassionate. That is why we have now recognized Palestine as a state. Together with over 150 other countries, we want to give new momentum to peace and hope through this recognition. It is our contribution to a two-state solution so that both Palestine and Israel can live in peace and security. We remain convinced that dialogue and international law are the best means to resolve problems. A conviction that we share with more and more countries who think as we do. It is a fact that cannot be ignored that the most brutal try to enforce their will at the expense of others. That is why we must further strengthen our security, both as Luxembourgers, as a collective, in NATO and in the EU. It is not against our values, but for our values, because others want to impose their values on us. Defense, diplomacy, and development are complementary. They are three pillars, but with the same goal: peace. We do not want to attack, but we also do not want to be attacked. For that, we need credible deterrence. The defense ministers are preparing the army for new strategic challenges. With more recruits, with more attractive conditions for careers in the army, and new military capabilities. But credible deterrence must also be credibly financed. That is why the government has set a financial trajectory until 2029, which will also be reviewed at the NATO meeting to adapt to the evolving situation. Over the next few years, the budget for security will gradually and in small steps be increased in order to reach our NATO targets by 2035. This collective effort with our allies, and to support these collective efforts, Luxembourg, together with our ally Canada, is proposing a new multilateral bank for defense, security, and resilience, which would establish a European hub here in Luxembourg. This initiative fits our country. It builds on what already exists. Trust, which inspires us with political stability. The expertise we have built up in the financial sector and the hub of international institutions we have developed. With guarantees and innovative financial solutions, this new bank would help create the economic foundation for a strong deterrence. In addition to a strengthened army and the fund industry, we must also consider security more broadly. We need to make the country as a whole more resilient, more resistant against all threats from crises. That is why we are developing a genuine national resilience strategy. This is now being implemented at the level of municipalities, critical infrastructures, and the government. We have supplemented this with specific strategies to prepare the country for cyber attacks and the risks of climate change. With resilience, there is also a legislative process. Resilience is lived practice in which each and every one of us is called upon. That is why we want to better inform and raise awareness among citizens, for example, with a practical guide that is available at the town hall. But real resilience does not stop with the individual. True resilience requires solidarity. It requires commitment, one for the other. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the people in the country who are committed to protecting our society. As soldiers and police officers, staff in the health sector, full-time and volunteer workers in emergency services, and so many others. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen deputies, these people hold a very special place in our country. At this moment, three things contribute to the cohesion in our society, especially for the three stories I mentioned right at the beginning. Our great nation is truly the collective result of thousands upon thousands of small, everyday interactions, meaningful conversations, and the many diverse relationships we build together. At home, on the bus, at work, and during leisure time. All of this forms itself spontaneously, dynamically, naturally. I don't want to just list a whole series of policies that strengthen cohesion in our society. A policy of cohesion that addresses this and secures the social model. A policy of living together that strengthens the family and gives every child a fair chance at a good life. A policy of living together that makes the path from a roof over your head to a home possible. A policy of living together that sees sports, culture, and participation as the common thread running through our society. A policy of living together that protects the environment and addresses climate change. A policy of working together that creates jobs and strengthens the economy through dialogue, not as an end in itself, but as the foundation of our standard of living. A policy of working together that puts research and innovation at the center of our thinking. A policy of standing together, which ultimately is the driving force behind the European project, and fosters a resilient society. With this policy, we strengthen cohesion in our society. With each other, for Europe, for Luxembourg, for the future. Thank you.